when video footage from multiple angles clearly showed a female student protester running directly into the path of a moving red SUV driven by another juvenile during the January 29, 2026 anti-ICE protest at Fremont High School, with the driver facing a hostile mob yelling threats, hitting the car, and stealing the Trump flag. Nebraska's political class chose to ignore the evidence. Governor Jim Pillen, Senators Pete Ricketts and Deb Fischer, and Representatives Mike Flood, Don Bacon, and Adrian Smith released nearly identical statements within hours, falsely accusing the teenage driver of political violence, assault, and hitting the girl. Police later filed no charges for hitting or assault, only for leaving the scene justified by the mob, and a pedestrian violation for the student. Yet, the politicians never corrected the record. This coordinated deception was not random. It was the public face of a deeper, interlocking network of media empires, agricultural associations, investment companies, and cheap labor lobbies that profit from immigrant and undocumented workers. The Fremont incident ripped the mask off these alliances, showing how Nebraska's conservative leaders quietly protect illegal immigration interests for financial and political gain. The starting point of this exposure is Mike Flood's own media empire. Flood Communications, headquartered in Norfolk, Nebraska, owns and operates Nebraska's largest Spanish-language outlets. Radio Lobo, KBBX-FM 97.7, regional Mexican format, serving Omaha. Fiesta 94.5 FM, Central Nebraska's first full-power Spanish station in Grand Island, Hastings, Kearney, and Telemundo, Nebraska. These stations are explicitly marketed to Latino and immigrant communities, the very demographic targeted by ICE enforcement. Flood has openly described the expansion as a smart business decision to reach the fastest growing population in the state. His customers and advertisers include businesses serving recent immigrants and undocumented workers. By framing the red SUV driver as the villain and defending the right to peacefully protest against ICE, Flood was protecting the customer base that keeps his stations profitable. This is not speculation. It is a direct conflict of interest that drove his false statements and follow-up interviews. Flood's connections extend far beyond his media company into Nebraska's agricultural power structure, the same structure that ties the entire delegation together. He has received endorsements and support from the Nebraska Farm Bureau, Nebraska Corn Growers Association, and Nebraska Cattlemen. He has welcomed corn growers members in Washington and co-sponsored ethanol and farm bill legislation. These groups do not just represent local farmers. They lobby aggressively for expanded H-2A visas, year-round worker programs, and pathways for undocumented workers to remain in the U.S. so that meatpacking plants, corn harvesting, and cattle operations do not face labor shortages. Flood's policy alignment with them is no coincidence. The same pattern repeats across the delegation. Governor Jim Pillen, Pillen Family Farms, one of Nebraska's largest pork producers, is tied to the Nebraska Farm Bureau, Nebraska Pork Producers Association, and Nebraska Cattlemen. His business directly benefits from immigrant labor in processing and operations. He has supported state programs for migrant labor housing while criticizing only foreign companies exploiting cheap labor. Senator Deb Fischer, co-owner of Sunny Slope Ranch near Valentine, has deep networks with the Nebraska Cattlemen, where she maintains strong rancher ties, and Nebraska Farm Bureau. Cattle ranching and feedlots rely heavily on immigrant workers. Fischer has consistently supported visa expansions to keep labor flowing. Senator Pete Ricketts, family investment ties, worked closely with the Nebraska Farm Bureau, Nebraska Cattlemen, and Nebraska corn growers during his governorship and Senate tenure on trade and labor policy. His connections extend to broader investment networks, including Berkshire, Hathaway-linked interests that profit from agriculture consolidation. Representative Don Bacon and Representative Adrian Smith both hold endorsements from the Nebraska Farm Bureau and Nebraska Cattlemen, with joint letters defending beef exports and livestock interests. Both support agriculture workforce stability legislation. All of these politicians are networked through the Nebraska GOP communications apparatus, Signal and WhatsApp groups shared rapid response memos, and the state party's central talking points system. One lead staffer drafts the core language. Political violence is never okay. Preserve the ability of people to safely protest. Nebraska is better than this, and each office personalizes it before posting. This is how the identical statements appeared within 24 hours. Even though every politician had access to the same video evidence showing the student running into the SUV, the deeper layer is the cross-networking with investment companies and immigrant labor advocates. The same investment giants, BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, hold significant stakes in the media conglomerates that own local outlets and in the corporate agribusiness processors, JBS, Tyson, Cargill, Smithfield, that dominate Nebraska meatpacking and corn processing. These firms profit enormously from cheap immigrant labor, documented and undocumented, to suppress wages and maximize returns for shareholders. Nebraska Agriculture Associations, Farm Bureau, cattlemen, corn growers, pork producers form the Nebraska Alliance for Thriving Communities, partnering with pro-immigrant groups like Nebraska Appleseed to lobby for visa expansions and residency pathways. The politicians' coordinated statements quietly advanced this agenda. By condemning the driver and defending the protest, they signaled support for the status quo that keeps labor cheap and profits high. The Fremont incident was a local school event between two teenagers. It had no statewide or national implications requiring congressional intervention. Yet Flood and the others used it as an opportunity to grandstand, push donor-friendly narratives, and score cheap political points. They watched the video. They saw the student run into the car. They knew the driver was fleeing a threatening mob. They chose lies anyway. No retractions, no apologies, no accountability. The news cycle moved on, leaving two high school students to deal with the fallout of a false narrative created by adults in power. This coordinated deception exposes the true allegiances of Nebraska's political class. Behind the conservative rhetoric lies a web of media empires, agriculture associations, investment funds, and immigrant labor lobbies, all working in concert to protect cheap foreign labor for corporate profit. Mike Flood's Spanish-language stations, Deb Fisher's ranching networks, Jim Pillen's pork operation, and the entire delegation's ties to Farm Bureau and cattlemen groups are not separate interests. They are interlocking pieces of the same machine. The Fremont anti-ICE protest incident did not create this network. It simply ripped the mask off it. The politicians' coordinated lies were never about protecting students or seeking justice. They were about advancing an agenda that benefits their businesses, their donors, and the investment schemes that rely on undocumented and immigrant labor to keep Nebraska's economy humming for the few at the top. The people of Nebraska, and especially the two teenagers caught in the middle, deserved far better than this fraudulent, self-serving performance. The silence since then only confirms how little these leaders actually care about truth or accountability. The Fremont incident stands as a permanent indictment of the deep, coordinated corruption that runs through Nebraska's political and economic elite.